How about now? Can you hear me?
Nothing. Sounds good.
Yeah, say that again because I had you guys muted. Can you hear me?
I hear you.
Still feedback?
Yeah, I can hear you, Rudy.
All right.
Yes, still feedback.
Ay.
Slight in the background. Can anybody else hear it?
Yeah, now. Well, I'm getting distortion now from anybody that's talking, like you too, Lou. Now it's like
Oh,
it's
really?
like a
You're
bad
clear to
connection
me.
almost is the best way I can describe it. Yeah.
Oh, there's an echo. Echo, echo. Testing.
How about now? Try again.
Testing. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Testing 1, 2, 3.
Check, 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 check.
All clear.
Nick?
Nick. 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 We lost Nick.
We lost Nick.
Nick.
No, what you can't hear me?
Nick. No, now we can hear you.
How about now? Are you hearing more feedback again?
I hadn't said anything
No.
until you just asked me, Lou. So yeah, but
I was going Nick. Nick. Hello, Nick. We haven't heard from Nick. You didn't hear that?
Okay.
Nick, did you
no,
hear that?
I did
Oh.
just this let.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hear it now. Yeah.
No, you didn't hear it before. You were out before. Yeah.
Can you hear me? Are you getting feedback again now?
No.
All right, I'm not sure what that was. All right. Well,
Okay.
but we're good. I know the comments are working, and I'm gonna go live here in about 2 minutes. You guys are still seeing the preview screen, correct?
Yeah, 3 minutes 57-second countdown.
Still seeing the countdown. Yep.
Yep. Okay.
4:08. Yep.
It's hysterical. The I figured out how to put people's names on it this week. That was my big step. You'll see in a minute here when I bring it up.
Oh man, I'm wondering. It's all choppy. I'm hearing all choppy from you, Rudy. I don't know if it's me or
you're
what.
clear.
I'm doing it from my phone.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it may. Everything is clear here.
You think what?
Clear here.
Clear here as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's you. Yeah.
Hey Lou, we're seeing.
You can hear me clear, but I can't hear you. I mean, I can hear you, but it's just all choppy.
Huh. That may be bandwidth on your side. Are you looking on the phone?
Okay. Yeah, I'm doing it on the phone because I'm in the car, but I have the laptop. I could switch to that, but.
Well, I would say stay on mute, and then when you want to talk, come off mute, and then. But maybe that'll help.
Okay.
All right, guys. I'm gonna put it on, and we'll put the home screen on here, and
turn my phone off.
Turn your phone off. That's the only other housekeeping thing, Jeff. And
ring her off, Lou. Ring her off.
Ring her off.
Got it. Ring her off.
Actually, I'm going to put mine in Do Not Disturb mode if I can remember how to do that. And I can't remember how to do that. All right. All right, let's go live. Let's do a show.
All right.
Let's do it.
All
right. Nick, where are you in? Where you at?
Would you say, what am I in or where am I at?
Yeah. What are you in? What are you sitting in?
What are you in? Not what are you wearing?
I'm in the A4. I'm in the A4. I just pulled out of Full Circle's parking lot, but I pulled over again, obviously, so I don't have any disturbance from the road or anything. So.
Yeah.
I left the old 560 there for them to tinker with.
All right, we're
I'm
good.
dealing with the.
All right, we are live. I just checked everything, and both Facebook and YouTube are running, and the comments are running, so we're good. So good morning, everyone. And if you're out there watching, I think there's all of a few of you. So thank you. So I'm going to introduce everyone. So this week we have in the upper, we're going to play Hollywood Squares here, right? So in the upper left we have Nick, and in the lower left
Morning,
we have
everyone.
Lou. In the lower right is myself, Rudy, and then in the upper right, our esteemed guest of the week. You may, if you read all the articles, more of the Rad era, the 80s and 90s cars. Usually, I give that to Jeff, and so we thought we'd have him come on today. So, a little background on it. So, about a year ago, Jeff writes for a couple of places, most notably Barnfinds, and I always liked his writing style, and while I consider myself somewhat knowledgeable in cars, I am lacking in the newer 80s and 90s Rad era cars. So reached out to Jeff, I guess it's a little bit over a year ago now, Jeff, right? And
Yeah, it seems like it.
yeah, so Jeff was open to the opportunity to be what we've titled the Rad Era Editor here at GuysWithRides, and does a great job on those cars, because every time I read one of his posts, I learn something new about a car that didn't know about, and makes us all more knowledgeable. So I thought it'd be good today to have Jeff come on and really show a great example of how the hobby's evolving, and as Gen Xers and millennials get involved, you hear it time and time again. Oh, these younger generations aren't into the hobby. Well, they are. I think you could argue that they're in it even more than ever. It's a little bit more restrictive for them. It's certainly a lot more cost prohibitive than, say, 30, 40 years ago. But they're into the cars they grew up with, and I thought it would be great perspective. I love it because I'm a little bit older. I'm on that borderline of Gen X and baby boomer, so I knew these cars when they were new, and it's great to get a younger person's perspective on how they admired a lot of these cars I took for granted at the time. So without further ado, Jeff, I want to bring you on. So you want to introduce yourself and how you got in this all, and then I'll bring up your cars.
Yeah, sure. Well, thanks for having me today. Great to be here. And you bring up a topic that's near and dear to my heart. And when I look back on it, it's very clear how I got into it. My father had a small but successful residential real estate brokerage in the Hudson Valley region of New York State. And my dad's not a car guy at all. Second he retired, first thing he did was go out and buy a Honda. But when he was in the business, he had to take clients out. So we had a friend in town with a small used car dealership specializing in Mercedes and other, the occasional BMW and Porsche. But so my dad always had off lease, gently used E-Class, and that's where my brother and I got hooked. I mean, there's pictures of us in the car I learned to drive was a 1990 300E W124 with the 2.6 inline six, and the car I somehow convinced him in high school, and he borrowed more than once, was a 95 E420 with the pretty potent V8 under the hood. And so from there, I just that's really, you talk about how folks my age, and I hate admitting that I'm part of the millennial sentiment, old millennial. I'm right on the cutoff. But that really is, where it started for me. As I look back at the cars now that I'm into, and these were, things that my dad would have drove, or so. For a few years, I was just kind of bouncing around to whatever I could get my hands on, right? So if it was just, as I mentioned to you a little while ago, some of it was just circumstantial. That if a car came into my line of sight and I could grab it before someone else did, I would. But over the last few years, I've really decided to kind of focus on the vehicles that really were significant to me when I was in those formative years of high school and whatnot. And seeing cars that I wanted to own that my friends' parents had or what have you, but I just didn't have the means to do so. And it's a real distinct era. From the colors to the paint colors to the features to the style of the cars. A lot of things were pretty boxy back then, and may look unattractive now, but to me, there's just nothing better than a very upright German sedan with zero wind cheating ability. But like I said, that's what I learned to drive on, so it's remained significant to me.
Cool. Well, I'm still getting a little bit of feedback, but let me bring up the screen show. And it's going to be what I would call a. Oh, give me a second here. Okay. So, can you guys see that?
Yes.
Okay. So,
Yes.
these are in no particular order, Jeff. I just want you to take everybody through. It's like a vacation slideshow of Jeff's cars over the years here. So, we'll just go through them and take you through.
Yeah. So this car departed last summer. It was a passion project of mine. This was a true barn find. It's a Euro market, right-hand drive, 1980 BMW 320 E21 vehicle that I found on a farm in Western Connecticut. Got it for $50, and the motor was in the trunk. But great story with the owner that brought it over with him when he met an American woman in the UK and followed her back to the States. The car was never federalized, so it was very authentic as it related to all of its European market features. It was a precursor to an engine that BMW used extensively in the U.S. So it had a baby M20. So the U.S. spec E30 chassis cars had a 2.5 liter inline six. This was a 2 liter carbureted inline six that we actually converted to triple Webers. So it was a real snorty little thing. And again, it was mostly original paint. Some tasteful period upgrades done to it, but I mean everything was really left alone. It still had the Euro specific H4 lighting, obviously the European bumpers, and the upgrades were limited to the side drafts. I had some period Koenig seats inside, along with the BBS wheels and a modest suspension drop. You talk about cars as it relates to your era, and as the car had a great story, people loved it, but I just didn't have a real connection to it. I tell you, I had kept in touch with the owner, and I saw last December he passed away, December 2019, and that really was kind of like all of a sudden I was like, okay, I'm going to sell it, because I felt obligated to see it through. He sold it to me for a great price, even in the condition it was in, but he said you can't part it, you can't flip it. And I said, that's fine. I want to bring it back, but I got to that point of saying I'm just not in love with this car like I thought I would be. And when I saw his obituary, I said, okay, I think I've done my duty. It's time to move it along.
Huh. And you ended up selling this at Bring a Trailer.
For a very disappointing result.
Sorry, I'm laughing.
It was a no return.
It showed me that, and it just the nature of the beast, I guess. But when I realized two things real quick, I'll pontificate. How quickly it dropped off the homepage, right? With the volume of cars on there, it just disappeared almost instantly. And the feedback, the incredibly nitpicky things from people who had no interest in buying it. And it almost discourages you from being honest, because there was a dime-sized spot of little bit of surface bubbling on the body. I mean, hadn't changed. I owned that car for the better part of 5 years. Hadn't changed in 5 years. And there was some guy sitting there saying, "Oh, he literally said I would part that car out because of that spot of rust." And I was like, well, this site has gone bananas. There's no coming back from it when you've got people actively over something that they never seen. So
Yeah.
I'll vouch for that too.
Huh. All right,
So, yeah.
moving on then. This one,
Yes, this was one of the few times I did well in a car. I bought this on a whim. I had a 95 M3, which I think is in the slideshow, that I absolutely loved. And matter of circumstance, it had a head gasket failure, and at a time where I couldn't really focus on it, that I now kick myself for. But I always said I wanted to get into another E36 M3. I think it's one of the best cars ever made. And this one just popped on my radar locally at a local body shop. And it was tired, just in terms of hadn't been driven in some time, but it was a 99 M3. It was a final month of production of the E36 cars. Had a little over 90,000 miles on it, and it was everything I like about E36 M3s. It was a very easy car to bring back to life. It drove phenomenally, and it opened my eyes to the beauty of the 4-seater convertible, because I could bring my expanding clan along with me, and my family is tolerates the hobby. I don't have a lot of interest in it, but it was one of those things where my wife said, "Oh, if you get rid of this, there's got to be another 4-seater convertible that comes to replace it." So we'll get to that in a minute. But yeah, this was actually a car where I realized, in terms of selling vehicles, it was a slam dunk, because it was accessible, right? If anything, the Brown E21 probably was a right-hand drive configuration, kind of limited the buyer pool, right? Because folks were a little bit turned off by it. This car actually sold in about 14 hours on Craigslist.
wow.
Wow.
For the full price. And it was just because it does everything well. You don't need to necessarily know how to turn a wrench to own it. And it's a pretty cheap car to own once you get through the basic cooling system and suspension refreshes. And I'm keeping that in mind for future purchases, that that's a good live by.
Oh, I think we lost Nick.
We lost Nick. It's all right. He'll be back.
Okay.
Nick's mobile.
Yeah.
And Jeff, I had the same experience. Actually, if you want to read the comments, I mean, I had people on Bring a Trailer were just commenting on the fact that the oil had, even though it only had like 1,000 miles on it, the oil hadn't been changed in like 5 years. That I needed to get the oil changed. Does oil age? I mean, I thought oil age is like fine wine or something. I don't know. If you don't run it, you don't have to worry about condensation, and contamination. But that's what they do on Bring a Trailer. It's hilarious, the comments. I mean, they were just brutal.
Right.
So.
Okay. Here's another one.
Yeah, so this is the one that started all. This is a car that every 3 months or 3 or 4 months, I try to buy back, which is just silly of me, because one thing that convertible taught me was, as much as it was nice to be back in one, it really is hard to kind of capture what made that experience with a certain model so special. And that is a 95 M3 that really was sort of significant, because, for years I had always had a car that was, late model, to work every day or what have you. And, I have an E30 that I've had for 10 years, and I wanted to get some fairly significant body work done on it. And so I free up some cash. I sold a 2003 330i ZHP and put the money in the bank, and then went out and bought this 95 M3 out of California that had a salvage title due to a theft recovery. And the guy in California, they put a big red X right through the title, saying the car is, effectively destroyed. And so he couldn't sell it for anything in California. I fortunately, despite the sometimes slightly wonky politics of the Northeast, Rhode Island is very forgiving to older vehicles. So I was able to get it here and register it, no problem. And hands down, it's the best car I've ever owned. I took that car everywhere. And I had, my wife and I, we took it on long trips and vacationed in it. I'd go to far reaches of New England, distant junkyard to haul parts home, and that thing never missed a beat. And like I said, with the head gasket failure, that, at this point, I would have just said, park it for a few months and get around to it. And whatever was going on, I can't even really tell you. It just, it was a little too much at the time, and I sold it. I had a friend who was a mechanic who loved the car, and he bought it very quickly for a car that didn't run right for a very fair price. So I just let it go. But I've got the new owners. He's since sold it. I have the new owner's contact info, and I got to stop myself every few weeks from reaching out to him because also like, it's just not going to be. It's not going to be what it was, right? It was a great car. I had a great time and had a lot of fun with it. But don't keep living in the past.
Okay.
Nice car.
So thanks, Lou. So this is a current vehicle that is actually undergoing some pretty interesting work at the moment. So it's a 2003 Eurovan with the VR6 that I bought last summer with I call it was a pandemic purchase because we don't have any local family. So my wife's family's in Georgia, and we have a newborn, so we weren't going to take a chance on flying at the time. So I said, well, let's buy something that we can road trip in, and this was local to me, and we did the drive down to the North Georgia mountains over the holidays, and the thing was fantastic. But if you know anything about these, a little bit of history, Volkswagen didn't really want to sell them in the U.S., and they were pressured by just some executives who had seen it on a plant tour that they wanted it here. And so in so many words, more or less, and some of this may be hearsay, but Volkswagen said, fine, we'll sell it, but we're just pulling what we have off the shelf. And that included a transmission that would otherwise see duty in a 1998 VW Jetta. So the automatic is a big time bugaboo with these because it gets really, really hot when you start working it. So while I was down in Georgia, which has a lot of mountains, I had a temp scan gauge on it, and I was seeing, it's getting pretty hot. So I actually bought there's a transmission, a 5-speed manual that the European market Eurovans came with, the T4, and a guy in California who imports all manners of European spec VW Audi products had one of the transmissions, the full kit, in his warehouse. So I bought it, and there's a guy in Missouri who has done a couple of these swaps. So going back almost 4 or 5 weeks ago, I shipped the Eurovan out to Missouri for this transmission swap, and I'm hoping it's going all right. He's told me not to bother him so much, so we'll see when he's done. But it's really a great vehicle, and especially if you got little kids. I mean, there's nothing like it in terms of the space inside, and the you can walk back and forth in it when you're on a long road trip, and give a kid a snack or a book to read, and the rear seat fold out into a bed. So it's a pretty, as far as the interior configuration goes, it's awesome, and it's got a VR6 and actually has a Tektonics tuning exhaust on it. So this thing makes now, which is hilarious when you're blowing by someone in the left lane and they hear you, and then they see what's making all that noise. So I'm looking forward to getting that back, and hopefully with the trans done, that'll really that and the timing chain are the two real fatal flaws of that thing, and we're actually going to do the chains at the same time. So it should be pretty good to go for quite some time. And I've got some neat parts sitting here ready to go on, including if you remember the Audi RS2 of the early 90s, companies making replica wheels that were the perfect fitment for this thing. And so I've got that, and some Project Zwo, which is a period tuner, dual round headlights, and some H&R lowering springs. So I can't wait for this thing to get back home. It's gonna be pretty
All right, somebody. All right, before we go on, it's not at my end. It's somebody has their volume up, maybe above and beyond. You think
it could be me, Rudy. I'll lower it down a little bit.
Okay. How about now? No. All right, I'm gonna not. Everybody will enjoy me not talking as much as possible. There we go. All right, keep going, Jeff.
All right, so this is a current project. This is a, if you've seen any of the stuff I've done on Barnfinds, I have a sick obsession with rescuing things out of junkyards. So this is a 1989 Suzuki Trooper RS. Now, the reason this is significant is because it's about the size wheelbase wise as a Suzuki Samurai. And the normal Trooper of this era is more your typical body on frame SUV, Chevy Blazer, etc. But this one, Isuzu sent 800 models called the RS with a couple of trick features, and it had a short wheelbase, and it had the gearing. I always feel the exact combo, but the gearing was a special, unique gear set that made it really pretty ideal for off-road use. So I had known about this truck for some time in Western Mass. It was in a salvage yard that I've been able to retain access to, even as the public access has decreased. And so I bought this last year as for my wife, because I have another Trooper that you'll see about in a minute, and this one is actually an automatic, which they made even fewer of, which is not ideal for me, but I figured it'd be a great way for her to get into the hobby. And she grew up in rural Florida, so she spent quite a bit of time with SUVs that could go off road. So it was at least a way for me to justify bringing something else home. But this one is on the back burner. It's only has 55,000 original miles on it. Really crazy story about the owner, who was a Harvard-educated mathematician who actually went to federal prison for trying to smoke an ex-partner, which was I found this information in the car, and I read up on him, and I figured out how this thing ended up there, which was that he bought property nearby, and he just used it as a dumping ground. So anything he couldn't fit in his narrow parking lot in near Harvard Square, he just brought out to Western Mass and never showed up. And eventually the town said, you created an eyesore. We sold you this building at a near total loss for the town. And so eventually he just disappeared, and the town claimed eminent domain, and all of his vehicles, his boats, whatever, went to a local tow yard. And then my friend who went to the salvage facility got his hands on it. So I'd known about it for a few years, and he finally let me grab it last year. But this one will probably be a few years out before it's done.
Okay, interesting. This is my favorite of yours.
So this is another, believe it or not, a salvage yard find. Now this car is the one car I own that I wanted when I was 16 and just have never stopped thinking about. So that same small used car lot I mentioned that my father bought his vehicles from, he got one of these, which is a 190E 2.3 16 valve Cosworth. And my dad, not being a car guy, I had him almost convinced that this was a perfect first car. And the lot owner came out and said to my dad, he's going to put this around a tree in about 4 days. So don't even think about it. And so anyway, I have, fast forward, and I've never stopped thinking about this car. I had been considering selling perhaps, my most beloved vehicle, which is the E30 behind me, to buy one, because prices had really started climbing up. That, $10K was kind of a, cost of entry for a driver quality car. And so one of the things I've had a hobby of doing is I go on a website that specializes in used automotive parts, primarily from salvage facilities. And I was just despondent, right? I said, well, if I can't afford the one I want, I'm at least going to try to find parts off them and start flipping the parts, because, the parts prices have gone through the roof. So I searched for a trunk lid from one of these, because it's got the rear spoiler, which was unique to the Cosworth. And I found one, and I was at a Pennsylvania salvage yard. And so I'm on the phone with the guy, and I said, well, what else you got on the shelf? Thinking, this car's long dismantled. Maybe he's got, the gearbox or the limited slip. The gearbox was a unique dog leg manual, limited slip rear end. Maybe he's got the head, from the engine. All those parts bring real solid money. And he says, no, I've got the whole car here. And I said, well, geez, can you send me pictures? Because again, you think, okay, it's been there for a few years. It's probably picked over. And I get the photos, and it's like literally the only thing sold off of this car had been the radiator, which was specific to the Cosworth, and rear window regulators, which, every 190 has the same ones. It's just some guy off the street came in looking for them. So what do you want for it? And it was, well under $1,000. So I said, it has some rust, but I said, you know what? I don't even care. I'm just going to buy it, because if nothing else, it's a thing, the total disaster body wise, there's still, $3,000 to $5,000 in parts on it. So I got it home, and thankfully the rust was all pretty typical. So it's in the rockers, which is not uncommon on this era of Mercedes. And you can see a little bit in the bottom of the driver's fender there. And the other real concerning area is the rear panel between the taillights. I suspect, probably some bad body work. But again, Mercedes sells that panel as one piece. And the engine has great compression. We've gotten it to fire up a couple of times. And this one should be coming back to life pretty much in the next few weeks, to the point that we can drive it reliably. But this was a car, like I said, I've always wanted one, and I'm real. This one will be a real. It's not going to be as cheap as I'd like, but it will still be under what the going rate of price of entry is for one of these. So I'm real excited about this one. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Good.
Good. Nice car. Nice car. Great find. That's really
Thank you.
Find.
Yeah. So this one is, let's go to the opposite end of the spectrum there, Lou. So I've had an arrangement with a friend down in Georgia for a few years. He's got acres and acres of old cars and trucks, most of them in fairly rough condition, but he's got a few gems tucked away. And so I've been helping him sell these vehicles. And he's a little bit older and doesn't like dealing with the text messaging and the emails. So I take care of that and just kind of bring people to the door when they're ready to buy. And every now and again, he brings stuff home all the time. He'll have something interesting that I just say, well, I'll grab that. And you'll see one of the other vehicles down the list here. But this one I literally just got from him, and it just showed up a few days ago. So this is a 1985 Toyota Crested. Now, normally a Crested is not on my radar screen at all, but this one is one of 500 that came with the factory 5-speed manual. Wow. It's also a sport package car, which means it's got a limited slip rear end, and it's got headlight washers if you're into that sort of thing. So I figure the total production for this specific configuration is probably under 400 cars, and on top of that, it's share this drivetrain with the Supra of the same era. So it's 5M GE inline 6, and it's a car that's pretty easy to find parts for. So I'm not really sure where we're going to go with this. I actually I've been looking for a new autocross car. I know this isn't ideal, but I've got no money into it, and it's supposedly ran 3 years ago. It was an older man who got sick and couldn't drive anymore, so it wasn't sitting out of being broken. It was sitting because the gentleman couldn't drive it. So we'll see where this goes. We just got it here this week. We'll see how difficult it is to get the fire up again. But the history of the model is such that the next generation Crested was actually somewhat troublesome for a Toyota. Had a lot of head gasket issues, but this generation didn't have those same issues. The driveline is supposed to be pretty stout. So I'm hoping.
What's the value on something like that? Like, what is it? Like, what would he sell it for? And from the Georgia, like, what's he selling it for?
So Lou, that's a good question. I don't think it's worth that much right now. I think if it ran, you're looking at $2 to $3 grand. But my hope is, give it a few years as these, right now these cars are being chewed up by the drift crowd. The guys who go to the drift events love these things because it's front engine, rear wheel drive, and I think they're gonna, much like you're seeing kind of happen with the E36 M3, they're gonna reduce the supply down to nothing. And I think for a car that is original to with some desirable options, it could someday get up and closer to 10. I think it's a long way off. So this one, like I said, I've been looking for a vehicle that could someday be put into some autocross events, and it's not the most sensible configuration, but I'm very easily swayed by a dollar a purchase amount of zero. So that
always helps.
Yeah. Are you gonna? I guess my question is: are you gonna clear coat the patina that's on it right now, or are you gonna polish that out?
I have never gotten into that. I have I like patina. I like cars that are authentic and real, but I like cars that look nice. So fortunately, that's very heavily baked on tree debris, if you will.
Yeah.
So we'll power wash that off and see what we're dealing with. There's only a little bit of rust you see in that fender, and it's the same spot on the other side. I've actually got two white fenders here already with no rust in them, so that'll take care of that pretty quick. But we'll see how this goes. If the engine is if it has low compression or anything like that, then it's got great value as a parts car. But I hope it doesn't come to that.
Cool. All right, this one.
I hated this thing.
Yeah.
Okay, tell us why. So it's a Subaru XT, correct?
Yeah.
It's the XT6, so it's got a motor. It's an ER27 flat six. I fantasized. I mean, this is how warped my head is. I fantasized about this car, for God's sake. Again, you go back to those formative experiences. My mom almost bought one. I spent time in one when I was, all of 5 years old while she test drove it. I remember that. Ended up buying an Accord of the same era, but. So, again, just as a kid, I was like begging my parents to buy it because it's the coolest thing I've ever seen. But I thought I had a Subaru that Rudy, I actually didn't even think about including because, again, it wasn't significant to me. It was just a driver with a 2003 Legacy. But I'll tell you, I did convert it to unequal length headers and put an exhaust on, and it sounded just like a WRX. So I did look for that reason. But that's what drove this purchase was. I thought it would be great to have just a vintage Subaru. And, a couple of things happened. For one, I learned that Subaru has very little interest in supporting the enthusiast market in terms of older cars. So there's zero part support.
Wow.
The dealers will look at you like you got three heads if you ask them if they can look up a part number for something from this era. And they don't even, and at least in my experience, it took me going to probably half a dozen different dealers before I found a guy who was just even sympathetic enough to say, I'll help you out. So that was really off-putting. The other thing is that this had a air suspension from the factory, and the parts are obsolete. So really trick car. Has locking, manual. You can lock the, locking diff right from the center console. It was a 5-speed manual, and so it was a whole basket of components that was really intriguing, but the problem is that you can't service a lot of the major ones. So the suspension was the biggest challenge that you cannot buy off the shelf parts for. So I ended up kind of hodgepodging something with ground control to create a coilover system for it that fundamentally worked, but as far as handling quality, it didn't really have any to speak of, and that's sort of an important criteria for me that the car's at least got to be somewhat enjoyable to drive in terms of whatever it's supposed to be good at. And I just couldn't figure out what is this car supposed to be good at, because it's not a handler, it's not particularly quick, and then it's not even endearing to the point that you're willing to deal with the lack of parts supply and the lack of support for it. And so even the small but loyal following for it, in terms of the Facebook groups and whatnot, these guys were backyard engineers figuring out how to make these cars work. And it just, there was too little payoff for this thing. So I was happy to see it go.
Interesting. I remember when these came out, and at the time I was still living in Buffalo, and it was cool because it was a quasi rally car. And I remember taking one out for a drive, and I just walked away from it. I just, even with the all-wheel drive, it just, I don't know, like you said, it wasn't inspiring enough.
Yeah, on paper it should be incredible, but that's not the way it worked out.
Yeah, my friend had a SVX that he loved, and I rode in it. It was a great car. It really was. The windows were kind of strange, but other than that, it was very enjoyable car.
And the SVX was what replaced the XT,
Right.
Yep.
Right.
Okay.
That was a good package. So that had that was a pretty silky engine in it, and it was a great Grand Tourer. So that was a marked improvement over the XT for sure. So this car is an 87 BMW 535 IS. So IS denotes this was a sport package car, so it had some of the M5 lookalikes. Had the rear spoiler, had the front air dam. was not a limited slip car. A limited slip was optional on the E28 Sport Package models, but it had the sport interior, so it had the thicker bolsters, buckets, and whatnot. And I grabbed this car because I wanted sort of a sister vehicle, if you will, to my E30. And this was fundamentally a good car. There was absolutely nothing wrong with it in terms of when I decided to sell, it wasn't because it was a problem child. It just, kind of was one of those moments where you decide one day, well, I moved on from this, and I was also coming to grips with the fact that I've been doing the white BMW thing for quite some time, and I wanted to start kind of diversifying a little bit and just exploring different cars. So I will say this one is what kind of had me on the lookout for another sedan, because we were able to fit. I mean, my wife and I didn't have kids at the time, but now I realize that it's kind of nice to have a hobby sedan so that you can more easily just go out for a drive with car seats and whatnot. So yeah, this was a good car, but just one that didn't do enough to make me want to keep it around.
Okay, this one's
Yeah. So this was the first vehicle. This is how I started my relationship with my colleague down in Georgia. I actually was customer first, and I was lucky I survived this first visit, because here I am. My in-laws live in this town where he is, and here I am, this Yankee, strolling onto his property, and I saw this vehicle sitting off in the distance, and I just badgered him about it until I could talk to him. And what it is, it's a 1981 Toyota Hiace. Now, the Hiace has become a real darling of the van life movement, especially the early 90s models, once they became old, legally old enough to import. This one predates it by those models by a fair amount, and really quite agricultural in comparison. But I knew there had to be a great story here, and so I bought it not knowing anything about it. And this was a difficult vehicle to keep going, but it had a little bit of the payoff I spoke of earlier that cars like the XT didn't, which was that there's actually a hugely loyal following for them on an international level. So Europe, Australia, the Philippines, there's a lot of guys who love these things. So I could get answers to questions I could find hard to find parts and things like that. And I really went into the weeds on this one in terms of finding out the history. And I actually tracked down the original owner down to the nursing home in Florida, where she was sadly in the Alzheimer's unit, but still had a pretty sharp memory about this thing, and how she and her husband were they're a military couple, and he was working on the Panama Canal back in the early 80s, and brought it home with them when he retired, and they've been all over the country with it. They've been out. She remembered out like real specific granular details about how they took it out to Pikes Peak and took it out to Crater Lake in Oregon. And it blew my mind because it has all of 64 horsepower. And so I just couldn't fathom driving it across country, but I realized that, everything's perspective, right? And so at the time, it probably felt entirely sufficient. And her husband was pretty shrewd, because I found the original, brochures in Spanish, that he figured out the motor was it's called a 2L, and it was sold in the U.S. from 80 to 83 in the two-wheel drive Hilux pickup. So he figured out he'd get parts for it, basically. And I honestly, I called a friend at a Toyota dealer, and I could still get a full timing belt kit, tensioner, everything for that crazy van. And it had people loved it. I couldn't go anywhere without having a conversation about it, and actually sold it to a college professor here in Rhode Island, who I know I still see him. He drives it to work and seems to be having a blast with it. So it was just, this was what triggered the Eurovan purchase, which was that we understood the value of a van in our life, but I couldn't rationalize putting two kids in something like this. So, but it was a fun project. But again, it was not an easy project, but at least it had the payoff of being somewhat entertaining to drive and having the, feeling like a celebrity every time you pull up to a gas pump.
All right. Another white Beamer. All right.
Yeah, so this is the one. You can still see it behind me. I've had this car for the better part of 10 10, 11 years. It's an 87 325 IS, so a sport package car, which had the, again, the usual recipe of the front air dam, rear spoiler. This one does have a limited slip. And my brother and I bought this out of Virginia years ago and kind of put it back together. And it's been slowly perfected since then. It really is a very nice car these days. It had a little bit of rust in the back just from some prior accident damage that, like I said, I sold my E46 to buy that 95 M3 and put the remaining money into this car. And it's just a car I'll never get rid of unless I really have to. And it's because it just does everything well. You can get into it whenever you want. And it's very accessible in terms of being incredibly fun to drive. It's the best handling car I own. And it feels modern enough that you don't feel like it's a penalty to drive it long distance. Ice cold AC. I can fit a car seat in the back if I need to. And it's just, I think any one of us who are enthusiasts know when you find a car that checks multiple boxes, it's hard to let it go. So this one will be with me for a while.
Cool. 4-place convertible.
Yeah, so this one is a 1991 Saab 900 Turbo SE. So the SE was a package the company offered that came in two colors, with Monte Carlo yellow and Platana gray. And what denoted it was, it had the Aero style wheels on it, and it had the SPG body kit on it. So that's the lower cladding you see there on the doors. And when I came time to replace the M3 convertible, I really wanted I wanted the perfect Rad era car. And I knew that meant it had to have loud colors. That was just the bottom line. It had to be something that you can see I'm fairly conservative in my color choices. So I wanted to break through that a little bit. So I set out trying to find one of these. And what I learned was people are obsessive about this particular car, the Monte Carlo yellow 900. There were two in Rhode Island that I knew of. And I got a local shop to contact the owners. And I kid you not, both of those vehicles were written into family wills and trusts that they were not to leave the family. They were going to get a niece or a grandson or something. I found a third one in the Boston area. And I found a guy's email. He was on a Saab forum, and I reached out to him, and he, as curtly as possible, said, "I'm never selling it. Do not bother me ever again." And I was like, okay, there's something strange about these cars that I've not encountered before. So, and then I started seeing that, I think there was one that sold via auction that went for darn near 20,000, which really discouraged me. But I put up a want ad on a Facebook group. A guy in Florida contacted me and said, I've got one. I'm thinking of selling it. I'm not really sure. And I chased him for the better part of a month, and he finally decided he wasn't going to sell it. But then he ended up contacting me and said, I did find another one of these in Orlando. And if you're interested, I can go check it out. And he did. And the one drawback was it had an absolutely horrible 3-speed automatic transmission. So I said, no, I can't do it. And then I spent a little more time thinking about it and said, you know what, if I can get this car for a fair enough price, let's just, if I swap the trans, it's going to only be worth more. I'm going to get that money back easily out of it. So I did end up buying it from the original owner, who had a running issue, which was, just wasn't starting. And it turned out to be a very simple, it was a bad ECU. So $150 for a used ECU, and the car runs absolutely fine. So it's actually here, and it's here in Rhode Island right now. It is in line, I think, in the next month to get converted to a 5-speed, and it's going to be lower a little bit. And I've got the Super Aero wheels, which are 16s as opposed to 15s, and it will need a little bit of work to the top, but I think next to the 190, this is one I'm most excited about. So it should, and I hope it's a keeper. It's not one I intend just to sell. It's a pretty hard to find model, and I think it's going to be a great car for any any sort of rad era gatherings.
Cool. All right, I think just a couple more. Oh, there you go.
Yeah, so this is another vehicle I grabbed out of Georgia. So No, I know some of the older guys don't really see what I'm chasing, but it's an '86 Trooper two door, and the reason I like these again, I had a science professor who had one of these, and I laugh now because we used to see him. He was a real hothead. You'd see him coming into school, and he would be kicking the door closed on the thing, and I now know it's because the hinges they go bad. So I replaced all the hinges on this car, and it's funny because I still have this memory of this guy, kicking the thing shut. Now I know why. He was a hothead, but he was actually doing this because of a fatal flaw in door hinge design. But in any case, the reason I grabbed it is because I think square bodies of all shapes and sizes are coming back. A lot of folks have been priced out of the Bronco and K5 Blazer market, and the Scouts are getting there too.
Yeah.
So I've wanted to get into more of I just wanted to have a 4x4 that resonated with me. So again, I got this. I'm into this truck for very little money. It did need a replacement engine, which was $400 junkyard motor that had good compression, got dropped in, and we were off and running. And this one's got no rust. The frame is beautiful on it. It was coated in red Georgia clay, but we power washed it off, and it's this lustrous black frame, and it's got some cool mods on it. So it's got a Cal Mini suspension lift kit. So Cal Mini is sort of a pioneer in the Southern California off-road scene. So mild lift. The bull bar actually is a genuine ARB bull bar that basically here in the States, they made 12 of those bull bars, and it was just a side of the desk project for some of the guys working for ARB back in the 80s. I found that one in Australia and actually shipped it home because ARB had a different division in Australia that actually made them, for far longer than the US guys did. So it's running a Weber 38 carb. It's got the daylighters on there, which are just, to me, scream 80s off road.
Absolutely.
So it should actually be. I should have that home in the next few days. It just needs. I have to order a kind of a full length safari rack for it, and then that one's just going to be. We'll see how that goes. That's one of those vehicles that I could decide, I could see some guy on Martha's Vineyard or Nantucket thinking it'd be perfect for his weekend home because it's got it cleans up all right, but it's not perfect.
Yeah.
It has some really neat like dealer applied 4-wheel drive graphics there on the lower sills, so it's got real nice presence. The few times I drove it before it kind of went in for some refurb work over the past year, it was actually surprisingly fun to drive. It's got the shifter comes up to here, so you're just kind of like a school bus driving it. But it's an interesting one in terms of if we decide that we really like having it around. Then again, I'm not into it for very much, but it could also be a smart one to sell if folks are. It's one of those cars, one of those models. I've seen a few of them just surprisingly go for strong money, and we'll see. We'll see.
Very cool. I love the daylighters. That is so vintage. Oh, that's the end of it. Okay. I think those were very eclectic collection. And
do you do some wrenching yourself on those things? Is that or you have a bunch of? It's
a mixture of both, Lou. There's a limit to what I'm comfortable doing. So, I spent a lot of time in salvage yards getting the obsolete parts I need to put these things down back on the road. But that Mercedes is one I'm just not touching because it's got a whole hodgepodge of things that we don't really know how far that road's going to go. But cars like the E30
you're very fortunate that right next to you sitting is Nick, who loves those Mercedes, and he's got a talent for him. He'll come up.
I will. I would.
Will too. He would too.
Yeah, he's a great help.
I've seen him dissect, take apart an entire side of a car to get to a tiny solenoid. It's amazing. It's amazing how they're engineered.
Oh yeah. Yeah, those Germans, they're clever, aren't they?
And Jeff.
I can't say the slang term we use when we describe those cars when we have to work on it.
Yeah, well, Jeff, he's referring to fixing a seatbelt presenter on my 124 Cabriolet.
Oh, that was
Oh my God.
that was
Yes.
I was ready to get a 3D printer and print the piece that was missing that actually tripped the micro switch. But or replacing that horn, that thing when that horn thing on where the batteries leak on the Audi.
Or all of our lovely hydraulic cylinders on the 129 convertible tops. We've had a lot of fun with that over the summer.
A certain rear window tripped you both up.
Yeah, or hand stitching a new piece of plastic into canvas top with a heavy duty awl that I had bandages on every finger by the time we were done.
Yeah. That was it was.
When they start drawing blood, that's when I got to stop.
Oh yeah, that's your blood. Yeah. All right. Drew blood and required multiple visits to the chiropractor to get your back as you were leaning inside trying to do stitching. You needed from the inside and from the outside at the same time. It was a treat.
I bet you wouldn't find many people that would give you that answer to the question, what did you do during the lockdown of the pandemic?
Yeah.
All right, so I'm going to. Why don't we move on to the favorites, Jeff? Thank you for that.
Favorites, good.
Yeah, so I came up with a last-minute contest today. We'll see how it plays out. I think I'll play it up next week, but I think throughout the week, coming up next week, if you hopefully I haven't had a chance to see, but if you sent me an email before 10 o'clock, you're about to find out what ones we picked. So I'm just going to go around the horn here. I'm going to start with, I'll start with mine. And it was this one right here. All right, you guys are seeing it, correct?
Yes.
So this is one of those cars, a 1946 Lincoln Continental Cabriolet, and it's one of only a couple of hundred. If you go to the website and read about this is absolutely a stunning car. And what's the Museum of Modern Art, a fair number of years ago, called this car a timeless design. It's I think it's the only car they've ever called that. And the sad part about this is it's V12 power. It was actually, if you know about these cars, this was actually, if you read through, Edsel Ford, basically on a whim, wanted a Florida car. And they they came up with this design, and he was driving around Florida, and everybody was so jealous they wanted one of these cars, they basically put them in production. So I can only imagine right after the war, standing on a street corner and seeing one of these come down, because this is one of those cars you think about, my God, who is driving this car? And yet the irony now is, despite that provenance and that timeless design, it's getting lost in the modern era. And this car it's a restored car. I would think maybe probably 10, 15 years ago, this car would have easily been six-figure car.
Yes, absolutely.
And now $35,000 will buy it.
Amazing.
So just one of those things of how people are aging out of the hobby that would have just clamored for this car, paid a premium for it, and now $35,000 isn't exactly giving it away, but it's relative.
Well, you couldn't restore a car like that. I mean, you have to buy it and put it, paint it and do body work and chrome and interior and do the engine. That's a flathead V12, by the way.
Right.
Flathead V12.
If you get a chance, if you're watching, the gentleman that's selling this car actually has a wonderful video going around the neighborhood with it, it's a 3 on the tree with the flathead V12, and it's just a neat car to see running around. So that was my pick for the week.
Beautiful car.
And so then, let's see, it was, I'm going to move to, I got to go back here. Oh, right, it was, Nick,
Luz was right there.
yeah.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, there it is.
So there's Nick's. You want to talk about this one? Why you picked this one, Nick? It's a 83 Mazda RX-7.
Yeah, yeah. My spinning Dorito discussion, I guess. But yeah, I don't know why lately, Rudy. As you know, I'm all German. But as you asked me to pick cars every week, I seem to be gravitating towards the Japanese sports car for some reason. But I thought this one was cool. Obviously, very very of the Rad era, and you don't see too many, at least where we are, in the southern New Jersey area, that aren't a total rust bucket. I mean, I know over the 78 to 85 production years, they almost made 500,000 of these. But I just thought this one looked really cool, and I just love the whole Wankel rotary engine, even though I would be crazy to ever own one. But
Yeah.
goes, and with my luck, yeah, I'd have all the horror stories right in my own garage. So, but I don't know. I just gravitated toward it. And of course, this one being the GSL, had the disc brakes all around, and the 14-inch wheels and the sunroof, the comfort creature, items. And of course, I think it's kind of funny that they're, on the block, it's, although we don't have a picture of the engine block, you see it's stamped, or the intake rather, the whole resi thing, which means, rotary engine super injection. So
Yeah.
I just thought that was kind of comical.
Yeah.
And I absolutely love the comparison video that you placed there with the 944, because that's obviously my year of 944, and I was shockingly surprised to see, in a quarter-mile pull that it was pretty damn close to eating the 944's lunch. But of course, the German handling, especially on a track, showed it who was boss. So
Yeah.
and I think this one was reasonably priced as well. So just a
Yeah.
little fun little.
The thing that struck me was I've never seen one with a leather interior like that.
Yeah.
And then this picture struck me too, because he's either at a car show where he's in the Japanese section, or it's a Japanese car show, and I was kind of curious.
Sure. Yeah.
He's got Rhode Island plates on it, Jeff. That's in your neck of the woods. I don't know if there's a.
No, you know where I think he is, Rudy? So up in Brookline, Mass, just outside Boston, there's a Lars Anderson Auto Museum.
Okay.
And Lars Anderson has both a Japanese car day and a German car day. And I suspect that's where he's at.
Oh,
Very cool.
I like the colors, the tan and the brown and tan.
Yeah.
I like that. I think it's reasonable. I just don't want to get into learning a new technology, having to start fixing rotary engines or doing work on that.
Right.
Yeah.
So
Right.
I'd rather stay in my comfort zone, so at this point in time, at least.
Yep. And then, so Lou, we're gonna go to you. And this was an interesting one.
Yes.
Right up Lou's alley.
Yeah. Let me.
Well, I've been looking. I have 3100 Chevys. That's my next vehicle. You said, what's my favorite car? I have 7 cars. What's my favorite car? The next one. That's my favorite. So it's a sickness. It's an illness. I know there's no cure for it. It's for a poverty. Poverty is the cure for it.
Right.
So that's the first year of the 3100, and the price on this was 6,500. Is he asking for it on this?
Yeah, I think so.
On
9,500.
9,500. So the first thing is Haggerty's Value Guide. In the lowest one they go to is fair condition, is $11,000. That's what is in fair condition.
Right.
Good condition is 21,000. Excellent condition is 37,000, and Concours is 50,000. So that's the range on that truck right there.
Yep.
So it is a driver right now. It just, Resto Rod, it's a driver. It's got a 350 in it. it's just you go to Home Depot, you drive around as is. You don't do anything to it. You know.
How many trucks can you drive that you've been shot at?
Yeah, that's true. That's true. That's true. You know, you don't worry about where you're going to park it. Somebody's going to give you a ding. You know. And that's what he's asking for. I think it could be bought for less.
Yeah.
And if you want to do something, I mean, you know, somebody wants to learn how to restore something and do it. Parts are readily available. Every part is available.
True.
This one's pretty much has, you know, it's got the Chevrolet tailgate. It's got the bumpers. It's got, you know, if you need molding for glass, you can get it. If you need glass, you can get it. As long as the frame, you know, is good. If it's not, you get a frame. I mean, I think this is for a do-it-yourself project. You can wind up with something very nice and something valuable.
Yeah.
The style changed in 50. Basically, it's the same truck to 60. In 58, 59, they had the or maybe 59 was last year. They had went to dual headlights. Then other than that, it pretty much stayed the same. And you know, I've been looking for them, and the prices are crazy on these trucks.
Yeah. Oh.
You know,
now,
so
is the latch there, the hood latch, is that a dealer installed accessory, or
you know,
is that...
that's custom. This is just like, you know, with Harley. By the way, just a quick aside. Did you get the video I sent you from the Harley video?
Yeah, we got to talk about that. Yeah.
Okay. Yep. So that's like Harley has Kuryak and these custom guys. So there must be a custom outfit that makes custom hood latches like that. I don't know why. I would have two of them myself. I'd match it on the other side, but maybe it was a economical reason. He only put one on, but I like it. I definitely like it. I may have to.
You still don't want to show off, Lou.
Huh?
You still don't want to show off.
Right, bro. You want to stay under the radar. But you know, I don't see a hood ornament on this, and I like the fact it doesn't have a hood ornament. My 48 Dodge doesn't. But I wonder if I can incorporate those latches on my Dodge. I steal that idea and put them on. Sort of like, you know, 68 Chevelle has the hood pins, you know, on a Super Sport. That could be a new trend for hood latches.
I got a guy. I know where I can go. It's called Home Depot. I think they've got a whole section on those. They don't even know it.
Yeah.
The thing I love about this post more than anything was the fact he took the pictures in the oddest place. I've said it, if you follow me a long time now, the two oddest places I think people take pictures of their cars for whatever reason: a gas station and a cemetery. I just think that.
Well, it's you know, it's quiet there.
Yeah, it's true.
You know, so it's.
They're subliminally telling you that car's got 1 foot in the grave.
That's good. That's good. But
it's true. There it is.
You know what? It calls to me, that car. That one calls to me.
It's awesome.
But
all right.
I also want, you know, if we have time, I also want to talk about Chris's car and the PPI stuff too. If you have time at the end of the show or whatever.
Okay. Yeah, we're actually a little bit over, but we'll let me get. So Jeff, back to you. And this was your pick, the Integra. This is speaking of Bring a Trailer here, not that long ago, they had one of, you were saying early in the show, one of these low, you and Lou were talking about low mileage. I think the Integra went for an ungodly amount, right? Was that the same car am I thinking of?
I did see one on there, Rudy. I didn't see the close of the auction, so I'm not sure where it ended up. But you know, the GSR is not entirely far off from the Type R in terms of finding one that hasn't been modified. Is really difficult to do. And, you know, this was just such a, you and I talked over email about how Honda and Acura generally, you know, Acura in particular has kind of lost its way with regards to making products that were really, you know, driver focused and simple. And now everything they do is very technology heavy, and, you know, performance may still be in their commercials, but it's not like what it was in terms of being able to find something with a 5-speed and a you know, absolutely, you know, Banshee like motor under the hood. So this to me was a kind of I thought an affordable offering for a genuine GSR that hadn't been stolen, hasn't been stripped, hasn't been modified. I would personally like the 4-door the most because that's just a sleeper and a half. But this car just, again, you talk about eras that resonate with you. I loved how simple it was. You know, you got 2 airbags and that's it. And it's amazing how far in a not great way we've come since then with regards to, you know, really making cars overly complex and making them just, you know, mini fortresses, if you will, as opposed to just simple, clean driver's cars. So to me, this one seemed like, you know, at least for, again, the demographic I tend to follow, that in a few years it'll look like a very good price, just because supply is already pretty low and it's only going to get lower. And I mean, everything from the stock ride height to the stock wheels, you just can't find GSRs like that anymore. And the other thing I love about these is they're so versatile. My favorite autocross car was a 2010 Civic Si sedan, and here in New England we've got a real long autocross course at a state police proving ground. So I mean, that car, you could just put it in second and just rev the daylight.
Nice.
But I mean, it was making power the whole way around, and Honda, I think, builds some of the best front drivers out there. So it's a car you can drive every day and find enormously entertaining, or you can take it to the autocross on Sunday, or even a track day, high performance track day driving event, and it'll still get you home. It's just it's one of those cars that I think does everything pretty well, and they're just so hard to find in stock condition.
Yeah, I had a colleague in Rochester had one of those, and he put close to 300,000 miles on the car, and he didn't want to get rid of it. He didn't want to buy a new car, and but unfortunately, Western New York winters being what they are, it had just taken its toll on the underside of it, and it was still running when he got rid of it, but it was, and he hated the fact that he had to buy another car.
Right.
So, let's see. So last but not least, you wanted to mention Bess?
Bess, yes, I want to talk about Bess.
Okay.
So 2 things about Bess. The owner, I know the owner. We know the car, Nick and I. Chris, his cars are first class. They're the best of the best, and everything is perfect on them, and they're maintained, and they're outstanding examples. And when he bought this car, he bought it from quote unquote, a reputable dealer who had given him the paperwork that this car had been rebuilt, the engine had been rebuilt, and everything like that. And when he got it, it had all kinds of problems, and he had to send it back out to somebody else to rebuild the engine correctly. And the point of this is the necessary to get a PPI before you buy a car, even if you buy it from a dealer or certainly privately. And that's one of the things that Guys with Rides offers.
That's right.
It's a free PPI for the seller, and it gives the buyer more confidence that the car is as it is represented.
That's absolutely right. Yeah, and I think the fact that we do that, it particularly on these old cars, you just don't know until you look at them, and to buy them sight unseen without that is just crazy not to. So.
But if you want that Austin Healey, if you want that Healey, that's a car to get. It's perfect. It's perfect.
Very cool. All right. Well, we're actually well into the next hour, so I think a couple of us have to run. But
right,
Jeff, can't thank you enough for being on.
Thank you.
It was very interesting. I hope everyone found it as well. And if you're watching, thanks for tuning in. We'll keep you posted on what we're doing next Saturday. And thanks for watching. Stay safe, and we'll talk soon.
Have a good week.
Thanks.
Thanks,
Take
guys.
care, everybody.
Take care.